Hi, I'm Jim Rohn, and if you've ever found yourself confused, heartbroken, or completely drained from loving someone who constantly pulls away the moment you get too close, you're in the right place. This video is for the ones who gave softness to someone emotionally armored, the ones who were patient, thoughtful, deeply loyal, but somehow always left questioning if they were too much. Let's be honest. It's exhausting trying to hold a relationship together with someone who disappears emotionally every time connection begins to form. And it's not just about ghosting or hot and cold texts. It's the way they rationalize the distance, twist the story, and leave you feeling like you're the problem, even when all you wanted was clarity and care. Here's the surprising part. Many avoidants don't even realize they're avoidant. Or if they do, they've spent years building stories that protect them from confronting it. Stories that sound like "I just need space" or "I'm not ready," when really they're terrified of closeness. Terrified of being truly seen. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what's going on underneath that avoidant detachment from a secure, emotionally grounded lens. I'll show you how to spot the cycle before it traps you, how to respond without self-abandoning, and most importantly, how to come back home to yourself with boundaries, self-worth, and dignity intact. So if you're ready to stop chasing, start healing, and finally understand why that connection felt so confusing, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and let's walk this path of emotional clarity together. This might hurt, but it will free you. Do avoidants ever know they're avoidant? The truth is, most of the time they don't, not in any deeply integrated way. And even when they do have flashes of awareness, it's often fleeting, buried, or quickly rationalized away, especially for those who lean toward the dismissive side of the avoidant spectrum, the ones who downplay emotions, overvalue independence, and stay distant even in close relationships. Self-awareness is not just lacking, it's emotionally threatening. Now, fearful avoidants, those who swing between craving connection and running from it, may sometimes sense that their patterns are getting in the way. They might even admit to themselves that they sabotage intimacy. But even then, this realization rarely leads to consistent accountability unless they've done real internal work. The dismissive avoidant, or a fearful avoidant stuck in a dismissive mode, will often have no idea that their attachment wounds are actively eroding the relationships they claim to value. Why? Because their coping system was built to survive neglect. These are people who, as children, did not receive consistent emotional attunement. Their needs were not just unmet, they were often ignored, minimized, or outright rejected. They weren't allowed to be emotionally messy or expressive or dependent in the healthy ways children should be, so they learned to suppress, to self-contain, to not need. But here's the cost. They didn't just suppress the need, they internalized the absence. They grew up believing that they were the problem, that they were somehow broken, unlovable, or too much. That core wound of unworthiness is not a conscious belief they carry around. It lives under the surface and it shows up as shame. And shame, real, deep-rooted shame, isn't just painful, it's blinding. It's the emotion most responsible for avoidant disconnection. Because when someone believes at their core that they're defective, that they will be rejected if anyone sees who they really are, then emotional closeness becomes a threat. That's why they keep people at a distance, not because they don't care, but because they're terrified that if they let you in, you'll see their shame and leave. This fear is also why many avoidants don't reflect. True emotional growth requires self-reflection. It means facing your patterns honestly, owning your role in the pain, saying, "I was wrong," and allowing yourself to feel the weight of that. But for someone whose shame wound is still raw, reflection isn't growth. It feels like punishment. Accountability sounds like confirmation that they are unworthy. "I messed up" becomes "I am messed up." And that is far too painful for them to sit with. So they don't. They deflect. They withdraw. They rewrite the story to protect themselves from the truth. From a secure perspective, This is exactly where your clarity becomes your power. You cannot drag someone into self-awareness. You cannot love them into healing. And you cannot keep betraying your own emotional needs just because they've built walls instead of bridges. You are not here to earn love from someone who's still trying to hide from themselves. The most compassionate thing you can do for them and for you is hold your boundary and let them face the consequences of distance. If they ever choose to grow, it has to come from within. You can't force that readiness. But you can choose to protect your peace. You can choose your self-worth over someone else's unresolved shame. That's not walking away in bitterness. That's walking forward in truth. This is where the avoidant coping mechanism becomes painfully predictable, because instead of looking inward when discomfort arises, they instinctively turn outward. Almost automatically, they begin shifting blame. When emotional closeness triggers their fear and shame, rather than asking, "Why does this feel threatening to me?" they start constructing narratives about you. Suddenly, you're too much, you're too needy. Or they'll fixate on trivial differences, like you liking Italian food and them not, as if that somehow justifies the urge to pull away. This deflection isn't random, it's a survival instinct. If it's your fault, then they don't have to reflect. They don't have to confront that core shame, the deeply buried belief that there's something wrong with them. Their entire attachment style is engineered around avoiding that emotional wound, so they project, they blame, and they move on, all to avoid the raw vulnerability of being wrong, being imperfect, or being responsible for hurting someone. And because they never truly sit with the discomfort long enough to process it, they don't grow, they don't learn. What happens instead is a repeat cycle. New relationship, same fears. They enter with hope, then slowly start to retreat as intimacy builds. And when the tension peaks, they tell themselves the same story. If this were the right person, I wouldn't feel like running. Or, when it's real, I won't feel this anxiety. But that day never comes. Not because they haven't met the right person, but because they haven't met themselves. Many avoidants even know that they tend to push people away, especially around the 4 to 8 month mark. And still they don't connect the dots. They tell themselves, "Why can't I just find someone who fits?" Without realizing they are the common thread in each emotional exit. The deeper truth is that for someone with an avoidant attachment style, normal, healthy relationship behaviors, things like emotional closeness, vulnerability, communication, accountability, mutual expectation, are not neutral experiences. They are activating. They feel intrusive, demanding, suffocating, and so these very human elements of love become the enemy in their nervous system. What you often end up with is a person who moves from relationship to relationship, never quite understanding why none of them stick. They tell themselves stories about incompatibility, bad timing, or just not feeling it anymore, without ever realizing that the reason they can't settle in love is because they haven't yet learned how to stay with themselves. Until they face that, the cycle. This is why, even when avoidants do show some degree of self-awareness, like recognizing a pattern of ending relationships around the 6-month mark, it often remains surface level. It's a mental observation, not an emotional transformation. Because going deeper means feeling the pain they've spent a lifetime avoiding. It would require them to touch the raw nerve of shame, their deepest fear of being unworthy, flawed, and ultimately unlovable. And for someone wired to self-protect, that kind of vulnerability isn't just uncomfortable, it feels dangerous. So instead of turning inward, they continue the cycle. The relationship builds, they get triggered, and they retreat. They either shut down emotionally, pick fights, pull away physically, or start scanning for flaws in their partner, anything to create distance. And because they've convinced themselves that the problem lies outside of them, they never stop to ask the harder questions. The cycle just rolls forward, one failed relationship after another. This avoidance of shame also explains why they can seem so emotionally detached or even cold when they hurt their partner. Empathy requires emotional presence. It requires stepping outside yourself to genuinely feel the impact of your behavior on another human being. But when someone is consumed with self-soothing, focused on numbing their own shame, easing their discomfort, protecting their ego, they don't have the bandwidth for empathy. Especially when they're triggered, their system is too busy trying to survive, so you end up with a person who is not only emotionally unavailable, but emotionally underdeveloped. Emotional maturity can't grow in the absence of accountability. You can't develop real intimacy when your reflex is always to blame, escape, or rewrite the narrative. And you certainly can't build a healthy relationship when you're unwilling to learn new relational skills, like tolerating discomfort, owning your impact, staying emotionally present during conflict, or giving without feeling engulfed. Everything ties back to that foundational lack of reflection. Without it, growth stalls, the behavior repeats, and no matter how loving or loyal their partner is, the outcome stays the same. Because love can't thrive where avoidance leads. As we come to the end of this video, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've uncovered together. We explored the inner world of avoidant attachment, not to judge, but to understand. We saw how deep-rooted shame can block self-awareness, how emotional defensiveness becomes a barrier to intimacy, and how cycles of blame and emotional shutdown keep avoidantly attached individuals from growth. And most importantly, we acknowledge that without reflection, without accountability, the pattern simply repeats, relationship after relationship. But if you take away one thing from this video, let it be this: you cannot change someone who is not willing to face themselves. No amount of love, effort, or patience can rewrite someone else's emotional script if they're committed to avoiding their pain. And while that truth can hurt, it also frees you. Because you have a choice. And that choice is to honor your worth over your impulse. To stop chasing clarity from someone who's still hiding from their own. To choose peace over potential. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. Your time, your presence, and your commitment to your growth truly matter. Healing from these dynamics isn't easy, but your willingness to learn, reflect, and choose differently is a powerful act of self-respect. If any part of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or your story in the comments. I read every one, and your voice could be the light someone else needs. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content that supports your emotional clarity, healing, and self-worth. You're doing the work, you're choosing yourself, and you're already further than you think. Keep going. You've got this.